you watch these videos every year, and everyone watches them from like a backed up perspective, like that won't happen to me, you know. I have people around me, and from my experience, you know, we'll stay out of situations like that, because you watch a video and it's easier to armchair quarterback something and be like, you know, I can't believe you didn't see that coming, but it very well can. So be ready for it, train for it, do it in the dark. You know, how many times have you pulled out your shelter and tried to do it without seeing it? Put 2 people in a shelter, use different sized people, just experiment, because you never want to assume, okay, I did this on flat ground during the daylight. This is going to be the ideal situation. This is when I'm going to use it. You don't know when you're going to have to use it. So more practice, the better. You know, I know it gets old, and we all do our annual refresher, and we just kind of, some people, you know, humdrum through the whole shelter deployment part, and okay, we did it, we're good for the year. Captains or as, you know, crew leaders or whatever, you know, just throw it at people whenever.
I would say that it'd be important to continue with the shelter deployment exercises and incorporate it with your crews every day. You know, if you drive up the field one day, just kind of quiz them. If we had a fire right there and something went wrong, where do you see for a deployment site? You know, always be on the lookout for deployment sites. So they're not as often as you think they are for a good survivable deployment site.
I think, you know, the training is the biggest portion, and feeling comfortable in that shelter. You have to have that attitude, is it could happen to me, and I need to be prepared, just like you are to fall a tree, or be prepared just like you are to lay a hose lay up the hill to pull back to a safety zone. You have to prepare for that so that you know what you're going to do when you get in that situation. My big thing is train as though your life depends on it, and I know now I no longer train throwing a fire shelter or practicing a fire shelter just outside on the grass in front of the station. It's now surprise when we're out on a hike, get to a point where we've gone at our hike where it's, you know, worked them pretty hard, and then make them deploy as a practice. I think that's helped, taking the experience that I went through in the shelter, helping me create the most realistic shelter practice training as possible.
Being a smoke jumper, our annual training, we're trying to practice deployment behind the propeller blast. And sometimes you kind of laugh at that and think, oh, that's kind of silly. But in real life, after being in the situation, I think if you could get an environment that resembles what you're going to be in, the closest as you can, the better you're going to be prepared.
We saw the captain pulling out a shelter, and we just reverted to our training, got the calming effect, because we trained really hard with the shelters, the practice shelters, and it was kind of crazy with the dust devil and everything, and kind of like blown away and panicking almost. And then once the shelter came out, everything was back to routine practice and what our training called for.
That training saved my life. It sure helped me, because I knew what to do, when to do it, where to do it, and kind of kept my mind about me.
The fire shelter training, I mean, it helped. I mean, it just kicked right in. We train every year on the fire shelter. You just sit there, and every time you go through it, say, why we got to do this every year, but now I know why, because it can save your life.
You know, I guess one thing that you're always taught in training, but I know I didn't have my gloves with me. I lost them in the river. I dropped my whole pack when I came out of the river.
Where my elbows were, my Nomex was never discolored or charred or burned. My elbows were burned, and my hands, for that matter, were burned by, I believe, just the radiant heat. There was no discoloration on the Nomex, and I got pretty lucky. It was just my elbows and my hand that was not gloved. My gloved hand only had 2 spots where on the knuckles where there was no airspace between the glove and my hand. So I had 2 blisters here and here where they were holding my other hand, trying to protect this other hand.
And when I looked back on it and I talked through the investigation, they asked me if I had my gloves, and I said, yeah, I had my gloves on the whole time. Well then, going back to the site, you know, my gloves were laying right there. At some point during it, you know, with everything moving so fastly, I must have, you know, taken my gloves off or however I did it, you know, just because I thought it was going to increase my mobility to, you know, get in the shelter faster, you know, and, you know, things are happening so fast and there's so much adrenaline running and you're not focused on some of the smaller details of it. You catch, you know, you're looking at more of the big picture and not the little things that happen. And it's weird how your memory, you know, yeah, my gloves were on the whole time, you know, but you go back and look at it and, you know, I guess they weren't.
And how many times do you get out of the truck to do a quick size up when you're 50 feet away and you don't have your gear on? That was the result of me getting some severe burns to my hands and not having a fire shelter, and having to ask a fellow employee to risk their life for me. You don't think about it much, but 60 seconds, 50 feet, that's nothing. First thing, I guess, from now on I'm going to do is when I get out, all my gear's going on. I guess that's the biggest thing I take from it. You know, it's an ever-changing environment, and it can change in 60 seconds.